Hello and welcome to our Cybersecurity and Brain Hacks podcast. This will be our second one, I think, for the year 2022. My name is Brian Powell. I am the Network Engineering Manager here at PCA Technology Group. I'm also an ethical hacker. And joining me today is Eric. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dr. Nealons. I am a professor, as well as anything then related to brain science, the human psychology of things. And this has been such a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk about then the human behavior side, the way that we think, the way that we work, along with then computers and how it is that we operate these machines that have certainly become a mainstay in our day-to-day life, both at work and our personal life. So today, I think what's exciting to talk about, as we get into the new year, is looking at our assessment in terms of the health, in terms of the quality of our cybersecurity. I think oftentimes when you think about assessments and, it could be a health assessment, right? I go for my yearly physical, my checkup. Maybe it's something I'm looking at in terms of my work, right? In my resume. I think we almost have to go into it with a mindset of like, oh, do I want the results that I'm going to see, right? These are scary, right? We have a mindset in ourselves that is very much protecting our well-being, our psychological well-being. We have a lot of these biases. The self-serving bias I think of is one that comes to mind where, when something goes well, my cybersecurity is great, my health is great, my employment is great. It's all about me, right? What did I do? I learned all these things. I went to school. I did hard work with this. But when things don't go well, right, and other people maybe point this out, it's like, ooh, I don't want to hear this, and I kind of push the blame to something else. Maybe it was I didn't have time to do this, or other distractors in my life. So I'm excited to talk about here today with regards to cybersecurity assessment because certainly this is an important need. It's an important need for businesses. It's an important need for people. But when we get this started in talking about it today, it's almost like we as individuals, whether we're an owner of a company or I'm looking at my own private security, am I in the mind space? Am I in the mental space right now to get the results and use that information to help me or my company, if not both, improve? And I think that's something that people got to sit with. People got to be able to take a look at this and say, you know what, maybe it isn't perfect. And Brian, I'm curious to see your thoughts about what you've seen about people taking these assessments when they get the results that maybe aren't as great or as shining as what they hope. What have you seen as some of the benefits of when people take action based on this assessment?
So, yeah, basically what we're talking about here is a lot of times companies or individuals feel that, oh, well, I'm doing everything I can to keep the bad guy out and things like that. They're under this false sense of security that potentially that's what they're doing. What an actual security assessment does, it kind of measures that. It measures the risk. It also measures your existing controls and things like that. So you really don't know the results of what you think you're doing until you go through one of these security assessments. And it takes it from soup to nuts. It really addresses three areas. It kind of looks at your processes. It looks at your people, and then lastly, your technology. Now, you notice that technology is last in that list, and it's specifically done that way because your weaknesses are really in your processes and your people. Most people have the technology side down for the most part. I'm not saying there's not weaknesses there, but the other two are really foundational where the technology sits on top of. So, and what we've seen, in clients that have decided to go through one of these, whether it's because of compliancy issues, maybe they fall under HIPAA or maybe CMMC, which is the DoD compliancy. Sometimes those type of companies and entities are required to go through these. Sometimes it's annually, sometimes it's biannually. And what we found recently as well is that anybody that's running or using cyber insurance, when their policy comes to renew, you might find a new requirement in there that you didn't see previously that requires you to have one of these security risk assessments, or when was the last time you did it. And your policy, price will obviously go up or down based on how soon and how if you've even had one of those before. So
interesting.
It's one of those things where you may not realize that until that time comes, and then you're caught scrambling. So we're trying to get the word out there that this is an important piece of the chink in armor per se, because it gives you a real world analysis of where you're at in all three of those areas. And it really looks at the nitty gritty. It shows your strengths, it shows your weaknesses, and it also gives you a roadmap of what is important from a company on what you can maybe knock off, low-lying fruit, and things like that.
So can you take individuals through what it would be like to go through one of these assessments? What does it entail? What does it cover? I'm curious to see what it is that if I was to go through one of these, what would I be looking at?
So most of these really are done at a company level, and what we do, we analyze the whole company as a whole. So we go in, we talk to the leaders. We do physical interviews. We ask them specific questions. The security assessment itself, there's various levels of this. So usually the first, we kind of call it three different layers. The first one is kind of a basic, let's go through this one. And there's a set of questions and stuff that we go through and ask. It's based on your technology. Do you have documentation? Do you have policies in place to cover you for this? Things of that nature, your controls as well. It goes through all that stuff. Some of it's physical questions. Some of it's actually going through the systems and verifying it from a technical side. And others is, just asking C-level people if they follow what they preach, if they practice what they preach. And then layer two is a more extended version of it. It just adds additional checks and balances. And then layer three is a full-blown version of, a much larger version that takes, more time, obviously. But it's one of those things where it's a combination of physically asking questions, physically going through the technology that's in place, actually looking at some of the policies to make sure that they do have them, and then and are being followed. And some of it's being tested too. So even though you have the policies in place, let's say you have a disaster recovery policy in place that in the event something happens, okay, here's what we do. Have you ever tested that? Have you ever performed a tabletop exercise on that where it's basically a mock exercise of, hey, we're going to go into your organization and we're going to pretend like you got hit by ransomware, and we're going to see how everybody in that company acts for the day and if they follow the procedures or not, and then you're going to be ranked on that. Did they follow the procedures to the line? Were they scattered all over the place? Did they recover in the amount of time that they said they were going to recover and they were able to, and things like that? So you have to test these too. So it's not just going through and determining, hey, this is what we do, but you also need some testing to go along with it.
I have to imagine that can be a bit scary to go through, right? That I'm volunteering for me to potentially go through this thing that's just going to exploit, what some of my deficits are, where some of my weaknesses are. And so I'm curious, Brian, in your experience with this, is there a way to be able to prepare people for this and the results, or what impact, what benefit that this has had for people who've gone through this process?
I would say in most cases where we've had clients go through this, they are not as bad as what they think they're going to end up being. And it's not intentional. It just, a lot of people were expecting worse than what they were. A lot of their deficits really is in the process side of things, where they don't have the right policies in place, or the policies weren't updated, and things like that. The technology side, most of the time, the technology side is good usually under most circumstances. Now, obviously, there are some organizations that fall in below average on that. That could be because of budget purposes or things like that. But I would say in general, most of the time the results aren't as bad as what some people make it out to be. Okay. Now, there are cases where it is a little worse than what they anticipated in some areas, but again, it gives you a blueprint, which first of all gives you a snapshot of where you are, and then it also gives you a blueprint of how you can get to a better spot. So usually what we do is when we do this is a year-long engagement. So what we end up doing, we go in with a baseline, and we usually go in with a level 1. So we start with a level 1. and we go through that process, and then we review what our findings are. We give all kinds of documentation to back up our findings, and we review that with the client. That gives us a roadmap. And usually what we end up doing is we go through that roadmap and knock off all the low-lying fruit that we can and address any major issues that they have. And then, depending on how quickly we can do that, we usually end up taking them to a level 2 or a level 3 assessment and going through it at a higher level to start knocking off those things. Sometimes we just stick with a level 1 for the year and just knock off those things, and then we reevaluate them on that same level 1. And then it basically gives you a score per se, because each things that you do, it's almost like a credit score. You start out at a 600 and now you're up to an 800. Well, yeah, you just improved dramatically because you boosted your score. So it gives you that roadmap on not only what the deficiencies are, we also go through how you can fix them as well. So yes, it does show your weaknesses, but it also evaluates how you can address them too. And
That's
sometimes
great.
it's very easy, and sometimes it might take more time or money because there's more investment depending on what the findings are.
And certainly from a human perspective, that unknown can cause a lot of fear and uncertainty in individuals, and that itself can be stress and anxiety provoking. So I would think that someone who is in that position to decide to go through with this assessment, I would say it's normal if you're feeling this level of worry or concern related then to cybersecurity. But it seems that being able to validate that and acknowledge that stress is there, that's okay. We can honor that. And let's work through that. Let's work through that uncertainty, because the benefits that this assessment can give and what it is that's highlighting both strengths and weaknesses of what you're doing is going to equip you with the knowledge that you need really for 2022. Because I know I have seen certainly in the news last number of months, many things moving to remote, that there's a lot more vulnerability in terms of safety, being online with computers and things with that, and making sure that you are as protected as you possibly can be seems to be paramount right now in the current climate that we live in.
Yes, for sure. So, and that's a very good point, very good, valid point. With many companies transitioning, not temporary, but full-time now to remote workplace, it definitely adds much more challenges and complexity into the security realm. Before it was all we had to worry about was the four walls of the office building. Well, now that those four walls are getting knocked down because we've got remote workers that are working from home, and now we have home networks that, okay, how do we secure them when we don't even control them? How do you know that that's even secure? You've got all these potential attack vectors that you're introducing into the system, and it definitely adds challenges from the security side. It doesn't make it impossible, but it's a different approach for sure, and different ways of things like that. And I'm sure somewhere in the future, we're going to be talking about how we can look at the remote workplace and securing that in a manner. It's always going to be an evolving world, unfortunately, when it comes to security. But we realize that is definitely the way companies are moving, and they realize they can be efficient at it too. So it wasn't those things where they end up being more efficient because people can't get up and walk away from their desk because they're in the comfort of their home now, and they just tend to work after hours without even realizing it. So it ended up being kind of an interesting thing. Everyone thought the productivity would go down, and it ended up going potentially the other way just because of the comfort level of people working from home. So,
and you mentioned something that brought to mind here, that there are individuals now that are working remotely for the last number of years. I could see someone saying, well, I've evaluated my cybersecurity maybe in the last year or two, maybe 2 years ago. Is there a reason why, even if I did it last year, that I should go through this again?
I would say this actually, like I said, the security assessments, I personally recommend either annually or biannually. And the reason why that is, I would say annually for those that are in compliance, and it has to be annually, or if you've made major changes. So to your point, when this assessment was done, they may have still been 100% working out of the office, and now they've got 70% of their people working from home. That's a drastic change. And while you may not have changed anything infrastructure-wise, you changed a process and people of how they function and operate. It's not only from a security side, but also from a management side too. Managing a remote worker is a lot harder than managing an in-person one, because they're out of sight. So it's one of those things where you can have Zoom meetings all day long. It doesn't mean you're necessarily managing them the same way it would be if they have an office, a desk in an office where you could just walk up and go over and talk with them. So it does, anything like that. I would say major changes would definitely prompt a new version of this, because the process and the people side of it probably changed, and it probably needs updated. So this would ensure that those updates are being done on a regular basis to comply with whatever may be driving it. So,
got it. So it's worthwhile to do, and it sounds like if I'm on the fence, given how much attention has been given to online and potential hacks online, it's probably worthwhile then to go through that type of check process.
I would say yes. Like I said, I personally would recommend either annually or biannually. Just keeping that cadence and the amount of information you're going to get out of one of these, and the amount of changes that happen year to year. You may be perfect one year, and then the following year, if you did no updates, but you think you're staying on top of things, one of these we may find that, oh, well, yeah, one of your systems is prone to a new attack that was found in the last 6 months, and even though you're being up to date, well, guess what? The company went out of business, so that attack vector isn't being closed anymore, so which puts you at a major risk, and you wouldn't know that unless you go through one of these assessments potentially. So
if I'm someone who's on the fence, or I'm considering going through this, or I need a place to go, how do I find access then to this assessment process?
What I would say is, obviously, not making this a sales presentation, but we as a PCA, we do security assessments for clients. So that you could always reach out to us, and we can do this. There's other companies as well that do this. But it's definitely something that you definitely want to consider. And like I said, you probably will find this being a requirement when time comes to renew your cyber insurance. We found a lot of clients that have run into that situation and didn't even realize that they would need something like this. So that's kind of what prompted us to get this out there, just to inform listeners that, be on the lookout for this, because this request is probably going to be coming in the near future for pretty much everybody that has a business in cyber insurance. So
if there are so many options out there, is there something that someone should be looking for with regards to who they go with as part of the assessment process?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is make sure whatever security assessment that you go with, make sure it's following some type of framework, security framework. So there's one big one out there. It's NIST. That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. That's really the one that kind of is the foundation of all kinds of controls and things. And it's very lengthy. I mean, to go through a full NIST blown one is extremely lengthy. But we also we personally we can do NIST, and we also do what's called CIS controls, and that's the Center for Internet Security. That is a subset of NIST. So we found that most small, medium businesses are fine with the CIS control version of the assessment, because it actually maps directly to the NIST side. And then the larger companies, whether it's government entities or Department of Defense entities, they tend to gravitate more towards the NIST side of things because of what they do and the security protocols that are in place for that. So we can do both, but I would definitely say whoever you're considering, make sure it's based off of either CIS or the NIST framework, because those are really the standards in the industry at this point. So that's definitely something to look out for.
That's great. And it sounds like certainly you would be able to help those that are on the fence of like, I don't know what level I need, and be able to provide that expertise to them.
Correct. Yeah, we could give them advice on which one was probably necessary.
That's great. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, then, for taking the time here. I know I learned a lot. I know how stressful assessments can be, especially when I'm evaluating myself and what it is I'm doing, and certainly want to reiterate that if you're feeling that way, there's nothing wrong with you. It is uncomfortable to have to go through this process, but it sounds like very much that going through it, it really can have a tremendous benefit to both you, to your organization, and keeping your organization safe with regards to the current environment that we're in.
Correct. I would say, in closing that, I agree that anxiety is natural, and a lot of people will be like, well, you know what? I don't want to know what's wrong. I would sooner not know. Well, it's better to know than for the bad guys to figure it out and to you find out that way after they use it against you. So that would be the best way I could say to try to, adjust your thinking to that anxiety and just take the plunge. And it's better for you to find out and plug the hole than for the bad guys to use that hole and use it against you, and then you find out. And you want to talk about anxiety, recovering from something like that is much more stressful than going through one of these assessments. So.
Great. I appreciate so much your time today. And as always, I look forward to talking with you soon.
I look forward to upcoming ones too, and it's always a pleasure talking with you too. Thanks a lot.